Imagine traveling to India. You're in the streets of New Delhi and you hear people chattering in Hindi. Nothing strange, as it's the main language over there. But then, you hear a language that doesn't sound right. You know some words of Hindi, but somehow, this language does not make sense to you. You recognize some words, but others seem completely off. You try to translate the words you heard, but nothing comes up. Almost as if it's a made-up language that you're not supposed to understand. Well, it's because it is. Today, we're talking about India's secret language that only some people are allowed to know. This is Hijra-Farsi, a language spoken by a small community and who is not accessible to people who are not part of this community. It's one of the most fascinating languages, but also one of the least documented linguistic phenomena. The first thing you need to know about Hijra-Farsi is that it isn't actually Farsi. If you took a speaker of Hijra-Farsi and put them in a room with someone from Tehran, they wouldn't understand a word the other was saying. The name is misleading, but it's called Farsi for a reason. To understand that reason, we need to go back in time to the Mughal Empire. The Mughals were a Turco-Mongol Muslim dynasty that ruled most of northern India from 1526 to the mid-18th century, with power lasting until 1857. Because of that, Farsi was the language of the court, the elite, and the cultured. During the Mughal era, Hijras, who were often referred to as eunuchs in colonial texts, held positions of significant power. They were the guardians of the royal harem, trusted advisors, and figures of spiritual authority. This historical aspect got kept and used in the name Hijra-Farsi. People from the Hijra community never claimed to speak Farsi, but they were claiming a lineage, a way to connect their identity to a time of prestige and protection. And this prompts me to talk to you about the other word in Hijra-Farsi, Hijra, because I need to talk about who they are for you to fully understand not only the reason behind the language existent, but also its name. The term Hijra comes from Hindustani, also called hindi-urdu, and has often been translated into English as eunuch or hermaphrodite. However, this translation does not really capture the cultural aspects of Hijra people. Most Hijras are identified as male at birth, even though some are intersex. Their identity has roots in ancient Hinduism and developed further during the Delhi Sultanate and Mughal Empire periods. In South Asia, Hijras are transgender, intersex, or eunuch individuals who belong to communities structured by a guru-chela system, similar to a family setup. We'll talk about that a bit more later. They are also referred to as Arlavani and Auriani, and in Pakistan, they are known as Khawaja Sira. Across the Indian subcontinent, Hijra is officially acknowledged as a third gender, meaning they are seen as neither fully male nor fully female. Currently, Nepal, Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh all legally recognize the existence of a third gender, with India, Pakistan, and Nepal providing a third gender option on passports and other official documents. Linguistically, Hijra-Farsi is what we call a sociolect, which refers to a variety of language defined by social factors such as class, age, gender, occupation, or ethnicity, rather than a geographical region. But the word cryptolect is also used because it refers to a secret, specialized language or used by a specific subculture or group to communicate within themselves while excluding outsiders. Hijra-Farsi is a secret language used by a specific social group. What's fascinating about it is how it's built. It doesn't have its own unique grammar. Instead, it follows the grammar of Hindi-Urdu or Punjabi and uses the same sounds too. What changes is mainly the vocabulary. This whole language focuses on having its own vocabulary, so nouns, verbs, adjectives are unique Hijra-Farsi words with a structure that follows closely on Hindi-Urdu or Punjabi. So, what does that language sound like? Well, it's a secret, so we don't really have many examples, but we do have some knowledge about it, at least for some words. Let's look at some examples to see how this works in practice. In standard Hindi, to go is yana. In Hijra-Farsi, it becomes vogna. To understand is samaichna, but in the secret code, is Chamna. Here are a few other common terms. Janani, a very feminine Hijra. Janana, a very masculine Hijra. Koti, effeminate. Satla refers to feminine clothes. Panti is a masculine partner. And, as you can see, these examples relate directly to gender and sexuality. I didn't just choose these specific examples, they just happen to be some of the most known ones. And it shows the reality and the history behind the language. Here's another aspect of the language. For example, Hijra-Farsi verbs are mostly with the same morphological patterns as those of the languages in contact. So, hindi-urdu or Punjabi. The infinite verbs end in na. For example, vogna, to walk, tankna, to drink. Why does a community need a secret language? Well, in the case of the Hijra, it's pretty straightforward. It's for safety. While they were respected during the Mughal era, the arrival of British colonial rule changed everything. The British Criminal Tribes Act of 1871 effectively criminalized the Hijra identity. They were viewed as perverts and vagrants, subjected to surveillance and arrest simply for existing. When the law is against you, how do you talk about your life? How do you organize? How do you warn your community about danger? A secret language can be a solution to help stay safe or to hide. Hijra-Farsi allowed the community to discuss their internal affairs, their rituals, and their safety rights under the noses of their oppressors. Even after independence, when those colonial laws were eventually struck down, the social stigma remained. The language stayed alive because the marginalization stayed alive. I just mentioned the date 1871 as a potential starting point of using the language, but the truth is, we don't know that for sure. It's difficult to find documents attesting to the origin of the language. Hijra-Farsi has no documented history. One of the few linguists and anthropologists who worked on this language, Kira Hong, has found indication of its existence from the early 1800s. While it's hard to attest the exact beginning of the language, it's easy to tell its purpose and how it became used so heavily by the community. Safety, privacy, and community membership are at the heart of the language. It's a secret language and people speak it. It means it can be learned, right? So how does someone learn it? Well, first, you are not born speaking Hijra-Farsi. It's a learned language, passed down through a very specific social structure called the Gharana, or house. When a young person, often rejected by their biological family, joins the Hijra community, they enter a family led by a guru, a mentor. This guru becomes the leader of the house, pretty much the parent of the house, and the other members become siblings, chelas. Learning the language is a rite of passage. It's part of the socialization process. As you learn the customs and the history of the house, you learn the words. It's a way of proving your belonging. If you know the language, you are inside. If you don't, you are an outsider. It creates a strong sense of solidarity and shared identity. For Hijras, having a language that makes them feel like they belong is very important, especially since they usually have to let go of a lot when they become part of the community. They view this language as something that's uniquely theirs and talk about it with a lot of pride. I mentioned some linguistic aspects of the language earlier, but I didn't mention one of the most recognized features of the language. Its intonation. It's a unique stylistic element to Hijra-Farsi that goes beyond just words. Speakers often use a specific, exaggerated feminine intonation. On top of that, in many South Asian languages, verbs change based on the gender of the speaker. Hijras almost exclusively use the feminine forms of verbs, even if they were assigned male at birth. This isn't just a linguistic quirk, it's a political statement. By using feminine verbs, Hijras reject masculine gender roles and assert their identification as women, or more specifically, as a third gender that adopts feminine roles. They also use a unique clap, which is a sharp rhythmic sound that often accompanies their speech. This clap, combined with a secret vocabulary, create a multi-sensory performance of identity that is instantly recognizable to other members of the community but remains a barrier to everyone else. There is a tension when it comes to documenting Hijra-Farsi. For centuries, the powers of this language came from its secrecy. When linguists come into record and put it in dictionaries, they are in a sense breaking that seal. Many Hijras are protective of their tongue. They know that once a secret is known by the Pentis, the outsiders, it loses its power as a shield. To keep the language secret, Hijras also simply just lie to outsiders. When asked about the language by outsiders, they lie to people to keep the language safe and secret. Besides, Hijras often tell non-Hijras they are speaking a regional language instead of telling them about Hijra-Farsi. Kira Hall also said that the Hijras she spoke to have been fairly cautious about sharing details about their language. Hall mentioned that they have to be, because they're so marginalized. As the world changes, so does language. With the rise of the internet, social media, and a growing global LGBTQ+ movement, the traditional structures of the Hijra community are shifting. Younger transgender people in India are increasingly identifying with global terms like trans woman or genderqueer. They may not feel the same need to join a traditional Hijra Ghalana. Consequently, the use of Hijra-Farsi among the younger generation is declining. However, many activists and linguists argue that it's not dying, it's evolving. Some words are making their way into the mainstream slang of the Indian queer community. Others are being preserved by scholars who recognize that it's not just slang, but it's a vital piece of South Asia's intangible cultural heritage. That being said, it is still used a lot, still because of safety aspects and the cultural aspects associated to the language. Hijra-Farsi is a proof of the persistence of the human spirit. It shows us that when people are marginalized, they don't disappear. They create. They create families, they create rituals, and they create languages. The next time you hear a language you don't recognize, remember that it might be more than just a means of communication. It might be a history book, a shield, and a home, all wrapped up in a few secret syllables.